Well, the Japanese economy hit rock bottom in the first quarter of 2009, and since then it's been slowly coming back. So you could say that the real rock bottom period of investing in the Japanese economy has already gone. But prices are extremely low. So we're talking about foreign direct investment now. Prices are extremely low now in Japan. You can buy assets up very cheaply. There's loads of companies which are trading at less than net book value. And of course, also you've got the fact that if you're a foreign investor and you're investing in Japan and you buy yen revenue, or you buy a source of yen revenue and you switch it back in your own currency, you're going to be making a lot of money just from the foreign currency movements. There's a lot of debate about deflation. I mean, some people say it's the cause of an economic malaise and other people say it's the symptom. I tend to think it's the symptom. From a top line point of view, the market in Japan is shrinking. So in that sense, it's not particularly positive. From the other point of view, you've got the fact that assets are cheaper now than they've ever been before. That's what deflation means. And secondly, you've got a different mindset amongst Japanese companies. Traditionally, Japanese companies did not want to merge. They did not want to sell themselves, and there was generally a closed atmosphere within the Japanese economy. However, that's now changing. You're getting a lot of M&A within Japan, and I think that M&A within Japan is a precursor to M&A internationally, so foreign companies coming into Japan and buying. Because Japanese companies are actually just as reluctant to merge with a Japanese company as they are to merge with a foreign company, as you can see with Shinsei and Aozora, Kirin and Suntory. Even Japanese companies trying to merge is extremely difficult. So once that principle is established, I think increasingly it is in the SME sector, then you're going to get more foreign investment. And also you've got this fact that you've got a lot of founder CEOs, guys that built up their companies after the war, are now retiring and their kids don't want to take over. So what do you do with a company? You either flog it all off or you merge with somebody and you try and increase your profitability that way. The retail area is precisely what I mean about how deflation is re-engineering the Japanese economy. Traditionally, the retail sector was extremely uncompetitive in Japan. You had a lot of middlemen. And when I say that Japan has a lot of SMEs, often these are not companies which sell to the retailer or the buy from the provider. They are companies in the middle, that they're taking up space between the supplier and the end consumer. As prices fall, you simply cannot afford to have that many intermediaries. So all these what I call parasite companies, rather unkindly admittedly, all these parasite companies are being squeezed out. And you've got these fantastic companies that are finding a way to cut through the intermediary steps and to go straight to the consumer that are doing really, really well, like Uniqlo, and also foreign companies that have come to Japan, like IKEA, like Zara, like H&M, which are also doing very well. So I think you can see that the retail sector, which has traditionally been an area of gross inefficiency in Japan, is being re-engineered, and I think that's great. And hopefully that is going to slowly move on to other sectors of the service economy. I love what's happened to Japan, because it's forcing the Japanese to think about the economic model. In a way, the Japanese have been intellectually very lazy. They've had, okay, we've got Sony, we've got Toyota, we've got Nissan, we've got Honda, we've got Panasonic, we've got Hitachi. As long as these companies are humming along, for reasons of face and reasons of prestige, and of course the enormous tax they pay, 40%, the high corporate tax rate, we don't really need to navel gaze, we don't really need to look at how our economy is structured. The fact that Toyota is now in serious trouble on a number of fronts means that the Japanese are having to do economically what the DPJ has already done politically. Right? Politically, the DPJ has said, Naoto Kan and Hatoyama and Ozawa, they've been saying, we live in a very screwed up system. We have to have a very strong look at our politics. What's happened with Toyota now is that the Japanese are having to look at their economic model, and I think that's great. We don't quite yet know what the result is, but I think there's an interesting confluence between this new analysis of their economic model and the analysis, the reappraisal of the political model that we've seen as well since the DPJ came to power. Prime Minister Koizumi came in and instituted economic changes which were controversial, but certainly they tried to rebalance the budget, they tried to cut the national debt, but above all they helped the exporters. In many ways the reforms were rational, but they were seen as deeply unfair by a lot of people because they seemed to favor the exporters. So the labor unions weren't particularly happy, or the workers weren't particularly happy, because Koizumi also introduced a lot of regulations which made it easier to fire people. Now, the DPJ came in, and it's always been very suspicious of the top mandarins, the bureaucrats, and I think also, maybe less explicit, they were also very suspicious of the top of the Keidanren and the top business people. Now, the way Toyota has reacted to the crisis, this aloofness, this arrogance, this inability to properly apologize, this top-down samurai-style approach, I think confirms the DPJ in its belief that large parts of the economy also need to be restructured in the same way that they are trying to restructure things politically, i.e. that you want a more nimble Japan, politically and economically. You want a more responsive Japan. That's an economic ideal and it's a political ideal. So I think that there is a lot of overlap between the two, and I think that if Japan does think carefully about where it wants to go, maybe refocusing resources away from the big exporters to domestic companies, especially to service companies. As you know, Japan has no world-class service companies. There's no world-class Japanese management consultancy. There's only recently been a world-class investment bank. Nomura, Nomura, to be honest, Nomura is not yet quite a world-class investment bank. It's getting there. So I think it's great, yeah, that this reappraisal is going on. So the reasons I'm optimistic is that Japan is going through a fundamental reappraisal. I think there's an intellectual relaxation which is going on. I think they're thinking about their politics, they're thinking about their economics. There's a change in there's an understanding that resources have got to be reallocated in a more efficient and a more dynamic and a more imaginative way. You've got a new party in power. You've got price readjustment going on. Remember that people used to complain the whole time about how expensive Japan was. Now they're complaining that Japan is getting too cheap. But I think that these are symptoms of the fact that Japan is grasping the nettle and that it is moving towards a new paradigm.